I think they're going to see more and more conversational AI. And I know that seems funny because that's where what kind of triggered all this was the thought that AI could be conversational. But I think it's catching up more and more so that you can have a conversation like you and I are.
Hello there, my name is Monica Burns and welcome to today's bonus episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. If you're used to joining me on Tuesdays for new episodes, you are in for a treat. This is a special bonus episode of the podcast in partnership with Jotform. Just like on Tuesdays, these bonus episodes are designed to give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. If we mention something you'd like to check out, you'll find the link to it in the show notes. So don't forget to head to my website, easyedtechpodcast.com, for all of the links and resources from today's episode. This episode is part of a special bonus series presented by Jotform. Jotform provides an all-in-one solution to streamline administrative tasks, enhance community engagement, and foster innovation. Using their no-code, drag-and-drop forms and workflows, your teams can securely collect and store data, automate routine tasks, and collaborate on team resources. Educational institutions are also eligible for a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. jotform.com/enterprise/education. And a quick note, this episode is part of a special bonus series. You can find the video version exclusively on Jotform's YouTube network. Today's episode is titled Emerging AI Trends in Education for 2026 with Julie Willcott, a bonus episode with Jotform. Today, I chat with Julie Willcott, a STEM and AI education specialist, all about the most important emerging AI trends in education for 2026. I've known Julie for over a decade. She's a fellow Apple Distinguished Educator and one of my go-to folks when I want to talk about education technology and even for book recommendations related to EdTech. And she's got a few for listeners today too. So we're going to talk about where artificial intelligence is headed this year and what educators should have on their radar. Let's go ahead and jump into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Julie. I am so excited today to talk to you about these emerging AI trends and things to look out for in 2026. But before we get into all of that, can you share with listeners a little bit about your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Sure. So I really work with educators to enhance their teaching and learning experience, particularly through the use of technology. Mm-hmm. And obviously that includes AI. I've done a lot of work with virtual reality as well. And it means I'm creating and curating content specifically targeted to a classroom or aligned to standards and working with educators to implement that content.
Yeah. And, we've known each other for more than a decade now as fellow Apple Distinguished Educators and just in the EdTech world. And a lot has changed in the past decade, in the last 5 or 2 years. And today we're talking about a topic that we probably wouldn't have talked about when we first met, which is AI and education. So before we talk about, where we are now, 2026, what has surprised you the most about the way educators and students are using AI just over the past couple years?
Well, I think really what surprises me most is just how pervasive it is. It is everywhere. And obviously, we can pin a lot of things to that introduction of ChatGPT to the broader world. That's when things changed. It's gone through a lot of iterations quickly in education, from we're scared of this and we're not going to do it, to where I think it's being used by teachers and students every day now.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing how of all the changes, like you say, the changes of the last decade plus, this one is just everywhere.
Yeah. And I think that pervasiveness is such a great word to use to describe kind of where we're at, the way that without even thinking twice, we might Google something, right? I think many people are in that mode of heading to a chatbot of choice and asking for help or for support. Just this past weekend, I was making some egg bites and I thought I had a dozen eggs. I only had eight, and I just screenshot the recipe that was on my phone already, right? And asked ChatGPT to say, what should I do if I only have eight eggs? Like, although I probably could have done the quick math myself, right? It was just that obvious next step, right? That obvious place to go to. And I think that comes back to the pervasiveness, right, piece. So, as you think about where we've been and kind of where we are, what emerging AI use cases do you expect teachers to see more frequently in classrooms over the next year or two?
So, two things come to mind. One is, I think it's interesting how much teachers are relying on AI to communicate outside of the classroom. So, we heard obviously initially about lesson plans and that kind of thing. But just like you're saying, I think teachers are going to AI to send communication to parents, to write up student progress reports. So I think that's really emerging a lot. And then the other thing that I see emerging more and more, and I mean, this is maybe a little bit what isn't outside of education, but it's almost an opportunity for people working in education, is I'm seeing that lesson plans are being vetted by humans. So that first one was, this is so exciting, we can do it. We'll put the tool in the hands of teachers and they can create lesson plans with AI, whether they were using a specific tool or whether they were using a general purpose tool. And now I think you're really seeing companies stepping in and saying, we're going to take those lesson plans and we're going to have an expert in that content area or in that grade band vet them. And I think you're going to see more and more of that coming up.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think with everyone kind of running towards different tools and not considering like what their role is, that human in the loop phrase, right, that we hear so much of, there is that like slow, and I don't want to say backpedal necessarily, but this slow, move towards, right, the other side, right, not going all the way back to the beginning, but to say, you know what, maybe we don't need to, maybe we overcorrected here a little bit. And we really do need to have some human eyes, right, on this work that might have gotten a first pass or a first iteration, right, with the help of one of these tools. So, as you mentioned, the communication piece, the lesson design component, what emerging AI use cases, maybe something that's not really happening just yet, do you expect teachers to see more frequently in classrooms over the next couple years?
I think they're going to see more and more conversational AI. And I know that seems funny because that's what kind of triggered all this was the thought that AI could be conversational. But I think it's catching up more and more so that you can have a conversation like you and I are. Because conversations right now have been very text-based.
Yes.
Even if you're speaking, it's being converted to text. It's not direct. And there's also been a lag. AI just hasn't been able to keep up with a normal conversational pace.
Yeah.
And I think that is changing. I think that's changing quickly, obviously for everybody, but that makes new use cases in the classroom where you really can put a student in front of a tutor. Let's just call him a tutor.
Yeah.
But a tutor who's going to be able to work with the student, work with them at their level, work with them. A good tutor is obviously going to be able to handle scaffolding, is going to be able to push a student beyond what they know. And I think we're getting closer. I just think about when the internet first became available to our students in the classroom. And I was in the classroom then, and it was like, wow, students have access to all this information. And certainly, absolutely, they did. But they didn't have knowledge yet. They didn't have making sense of all that information. And AI is going through a similar transformation that in its first iterations, what it gave you was accurate. It was dated, right? I mean, we're looking at that early Chat GPT. The information was tied to things really pre-2020. And that's gone now. You can now ask it about, I'm going to this concert. What can you tell me about road construction around it, right? I mean, things that you just couldn't get before. And so that's going to make new use cases in the classroom because it's just going to be so immediate. It's no longer going to be accessing in sentence in a comprehensive, more knowledge-based way, the information that's out there. It's like making sense of it today.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to find that it can be used differently in classrooms once you get to that point.
Yeah, that's such an interesting one because, I find in my personal, my practice of interacting with technology, I use a lot of voice to text, a lot of dictation, right? So a lot of audio, right? When I'm inputting information and not as much like for an interaction, right? In a digital space. But that has changed for me in just the past probably month or so that we're, talking today, where I found that the smart home device, right? In my home is a lot stronger in terms of the back and forth than it had been 6 months ago, right? The voice to text dictation that I use across different tools just to speed my workflow during the day has gotten a lot stronger, right? Not just saying word for word, but also making my sentence, right, a little bit tighter or closer to what I was trying to convey. And, even in the past year, we've seen these audio tools, whether it's from Notebook LM and the audio overview or their Illuminate tool, right? So the audio piece, especially for those back and forths, is definitely one that, I think is worth watching.
So I have experienced an AI interview now, and it was really fascinating. And this is with a company that's doing what we were talking about, human vetting of AI generated content. And so if someone's interested in doing contract work for this company, they say, well, the first step after they vet your resume, which of course we know that's being done by AI, right? It's pulling out the key terms and deciding if you qualify. Then they go to an AI-based interview. And so the AI interview is a replication of a conversation like you and I are having. The human needs to be present, right? It's not, you have to turn on a camera. They don't want to not see you. The AI it's very simple. There's no avatar.
Okay.
There's none of that. It's both spoken word and then the words are appearing on the screen at the same time.
Okay.
And it goes for 20 minutes. It was good. I was impressed because how much it could relate to facts from my information and pull them in. And we talked generally about some trends. Then the AI provided me with AI generated content for me to critique.
And right.
And like I say, I mean, it was slow. It didn't quite have that flow yet. And it was a little repetitive in that it said on numerous occasions, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Right.
Quite in the way that a human would. But just seeing how far that's gotten, and I think we're gonna see more and more of that. And that can be applied to school settings too. Again, if you're doing tutoring, you could do the same thing, same style, but with tutoring.
A quick note from the presenter of today's episode, Jotform. Jotform lets you build a form in minutes. Student survey forms, homework submission forms, online quizzes, and so much more. You can start from scratch, or if you want to get a head start, check out their collection of free form templates designed with teachers, schools, and districts in mind. Learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. jotform.com/enterprise/education. Yeah, and I think for many people who hear AI tutoring, they're just imagining a chatbot experience. Like maybe the student can press play and hear the words read aloud, but it's not like its primary way of engaging with that student, right? So I love that experience that you've had, right, and sharing that with us, because I think that shows, a real world context where we might say this is not just right in one area, but it may be right in that AI tutoring area. And maybe some of these things that we think we know what they mean, right, are going to evolve.
Well, and I mean, all of us, no, not all of us, but a lot of us have had experience with those chatbots. Particularly for me, that's fallen in the travel mode, right? And when you call them and, oh, your flight was canceled, let me tell you what the other options are. Well, I am geeky enough to know that's all been programmed in the background. When you were getting that, let's just randomly say 8 years ago, 5 years ago, that was programmed in the background. And somebody had said, if this flight's canceled, go to this list and look at these flights.
Yeah.
We're moving away from that. It's no longer programmed in the background. It's going to look obviously at information, but the answer is not in a flowchart type method like it was before. That's what chatbots were originally written, sort of this flowchart.
If then, right.
Doesn't work, right. If this doesn't work, try that. And now it's just so different how it can say, you mention plants, let's talk about photosynthesis. And it's not because the flowchart says, go there next.
Right.
It's because there's a logical connection. So, I mean, that trend has got to seep into what's happening in education.
Yeah, and that's a huge shift, particularly for AI tutoring that we know, is an area of focus for a lot of schools and districts, whether they're, have a budget for supplemental tutoring and they're debating what kind of tools to use, or they're making recommendations to families, or they're finding, right, this tutoring component built in to something that they've already, subscribe to or purchase for their district, and kind of deciding if that kind of AI is okay, for their students. So, from an instructional planning side, you mentioned some of the lesson plan components and communication piece, and expanding upon that, how do you see AI tools changing day-to-day instructional planning for teachers, let's say by the end of 2026?
Well, it's certainly going to allow teachers, and I know they've been saying this for a while, to be more personalized. There's a lot of ways now that we're going to be able, and some of that personalization may be for individual students, but it also may be for the geography that you teach in, or maybe it's going to be for a whole class, but making it more relevant to something that's happening in the community or happening in February or whatever. So I really think there's going to be so much there to just make that a much more custom experience. That's going to be an adjustment to teachers, how they track that and how they manage it. I've just been thinking about it becomes more of a managerial function, right? It's not just knowing the content, and it's not knowing the best way to teach phonics or the best way to explain mathematics. It's about how do you manage this group of people, that is your students, that you want to learn a certain thing. So they're going to, I think, become more managers of information. I think that's going to be a trend and a change we see happening.
Yeah. And, and you alluded to just that personalized learning, like promise, right? That we've heard so much of when it comes to ed tech, right? Over the past 2 decades, perhaps, right? So this may be, right, that technology. And I know one of the things I often say when working with groups is, we're watching the scaling that's taking place. Like, how can I scale this, like, thing that I have always done or that I know is important, that I am doing, but now maybe I can just do at a higher rate, whatever that might mean. And, when we think about, teachers and the kind of new skills or understandings that they need to have, what do educators need to develop to keep pace with these AI trends we'll see over the course of the year?
So I go back and forth on how much they definitely need AI literacy. What is it? What is it not? I tend to go, let me tell you how it started. Let's look at how it works. And I'm not sure if that's necessary, But at some level it is. At some level, just like when ChatGPT first came on the scene and we had to know it's not looking at the whole internet. It's not looking at current information. And that was a critical piece. I didn't really need to know how the information was scraped and cleaned up, et cetera. So I still think there's that. There's this literacy that is a skill that they're going to have. And part of that literacy is knowing where there's biases and knowing how to address those. I think we are still moving, as with all this educational technology, to the creation phase. And I think that creation phase may be more problematic.
Yeah.
And then teachers really need to learn and know how to teach about finding errors, finding hallucinations. I've done a lot of my work has been honestly text-based, and it's been in content areas, STEM related for me, where I have a depth of understanding. And I've realized how I ask questions in a certain way because I have that depth of understanding. Now I've started using AI to do this very random thing where I have a bunch of old postcards from food and agriculture.
Yeah.
And I thought, I ought to take these and kind of do a write up, a blog or a Substack or something like that, talking about these postcards. And I've started taking pictures of them, giving them to AI and saying, tell me about this postcard. They're postcards, so they obviously have some information on the back. The AI is totally making up things. I mean, it's saying, well, based on the quote in the image, there is no quote in the image.
Yeah.
Or this picture was taken by, and giving me a name and a person. And then when I turn it over, I can see, no, I know the name of the picture. I know the person.
Yeah.
You've made up a story.
Yeah.
Now, it has accuracies in it? Sure. It does have accuracies. That's the scary part, right? Because I can believe it. Yeah, it was taken in the 50s. It was taken in France. Okay. But that wasn't the person.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's going to be hard for teachers, for students, for all of us to figure out, particularly when we move into areas where we don't have a core understanding, right? Then how do we know what's right and what's made up?
Yeah. And I think that's when we talk about, what skills should everyone have, right? Particularly those who might be introducing a set of tools to students or sharing strategies with them. That's a crucial component, right? Is understanding how these tools are changing, what their limitations are. And, we think about anything that's moving quickly, which I think we could absolutely say about, AI in general and AI in education. It can be hard to feel like we know what's new, right, one day versus the next. So where do you go to stay up to date about AI in general and, an AI in education more specifically?
Yeah, so I'm a big reader and I go to several books. I go to books. I'm interested a lot in the books that are the why, not so much here's the tools and these work in this setting. But, there's a wonderful book called Unmasking AI, and that talks a lot about bias. It's a memoir, actually, so it's got a very personal experience in there. I'm reading one now called The Coming Wave, and it's talking a lot about the intersection of biology, really medical science, and AI. It's a little scary. It's good to read and to think about those things. And then there's some other really good books that are a little more how-to focused and are a little more, as a teacher, here's some tools I can pull in and use in my classroom. Wired magazine is great if you're a techie geek and you want to know about the direction of technology. They have whole issues on AI. And I think, Monica, you're going to make available these lists. Yeah. And it takes reading some of these and saying, okay, what is the connection with AI? I like to look at how AI's been used in other fields. And I feel this way about all ed tech because it kind of shows where things are coming. And right now, I'm particularly intrigued by how AI is being used in the creative industries, because that has a parallels with schools in terms of the creative process, right? And in writing and what are those implications? There's certainly no lack of conversations being had. It's really like picking the ones and saying, these are ones where they speak to me. There are educational conferences as well. I get some of my information from those. Those are nice because there's networking opportunities built in too, so that it's not just me reading about it or me thinking about it, but it's me talking about it. And that, of course, pushes me to think about things differently. So those are kind of places that I go to look for more information.
And that's perfect. We'll link out to those for anyone who's listening. Unmasking AI, you recommended to me a couple years ago, and I read and I referenced that a lot, right, in conversations. Bias, what it looks like behind the scenes with some of these tools. And yeah, that's a great read as well. Digestible, which sometimes the tech books can feel a little bit heavy for sure. Well, Julie, this has been such a great conversation, unpacking some of the trends, some of what you're seeing, what you anticipate happening within this space. For people who want to connect with you and learn more about your work, we'll link out everything. But if you could shout it out for someone who's on the move maybe today listening, that would be great too.
I think the best place to find out about me would be through LinkedIn. And my name is Julie Willcott. That is Willcott with 2 L's and 2 T's. Fortunately, that's a little bit different spelling. So just knowing that, you'll be able to find me pretty quickly. And I do have a detailed CV on there, so you can see some of the things I've done in the past. And, I look forward to connecting with people here. And I will be coming up, speaking of conferences, I will be at South by Southwest. And if anybody sees this and wants to continue the conversation, I'd love to connect there as well.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure to link out to all of those things. Julie, thank you so much for your time and for unpacking this big topic with us today.
Sure. It's great to talk.
It was so much fun chatting with Julie today, so let's finish up by making this EdTech easy with a few key points from today's episode. AI has become deeply embedded in everyday teaching and learning, far faster than past EdTech shifts. A growing trend is AI-generated lesson plans being vetted by human experts, signaling a more balanced, human-in-the-loop approach. Conversational AI is improving quickly, opening the door for more realistic AI tutoring experiences that go beyond text-based interactions. To stay current, educators must combine reading, conversations, conferences, and the insights they get across different industries instead of relying on one single source. Remember, you can find the show notes and full list of resources from today's episode by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com. That's where you'll find all the ways to connect with Julie Willcott and, of course, connect with the team at Jotform too. A big thank you to Jotform, the presenter of today's episode and this special series. If you want to watch the video version of this episode, you can find it exclusively on Jotform's YouTube network. Just head to YouTube and type Jotform in the search bar. To learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise, head to jotform.com/enterprise/education. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or another favorite app, maybe even YouTube, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button. When you follow along with the podcast, each new episode will download for you automatically so you don't miss a thing. It's totally free to follow or subscribe. It just helps you get those notifications so you know when a new episode is available. And if you have a moment and are feeling extra helpful today, please leave a rating or review for the podcast. It helps other educators find this podcast when they're searching for topics like EdTech in their podcast app. Have a great week and check back on Tuesday morning for another new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast.